Hello, Vape Village, and welcome to our last session with Karys McEwen for term two. In case you've forgotten, since last time we spoke to her, Karys is the CBCA Vic branch president. I'm going to stop there because she's already shaking her head. What she is also, however, is a school librarian who is back in a school. How's it been, Karys?
In a little empty classroom with no students. So at Richmond High School, we only have years 7 to 9. So we don't have any students back at the moment. So it's pretty quiet, just the teaching staff and support staff here this week.
And the few students who are on campus are in your library, which is why you're not.
That's why I'm hiding up here, because my library has got a handful of students in it. And I'm sure you can hear in the background a piano being tuned as well. So I'm not in my quiet home anymore, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. And just so people know, those plants behind you are not real plants. It's a very long backstory behind those plants, but suffice to say they're there to absorb noise because
they're acoustic related, yes.
Exactly. They do a limited job at that, but they're something anyway. They are the legacy of course, Colin Simpson, the principal of Richmond, who unfortunately passed away last year. He spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about those plants, so it is quite a fond memory I have of him. All right, Karys, what do you got for us today?
Great. So the first thing I wanted to do was do the year 7 and 8 recommendations. Obviously, it's quite a difficult time in the world right now, not only with the global pandemic, but the escalating situation in the US. And I think that one way that I feel I can maybe support teachers and librarians who are trying to help their young students understand these issues a little bit further is through great literature. And there's one book in particular that I would really highly recommend to younger readers in particular. I would also give this probably to upper primary students, and that's called Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes. It's a Black Lives Matter book for younger readers in a similar vein to titles like The Hate U Give or Dear Martin that are for older young adults. This one is for younger readers. It tells the story of a 12-year-old boy in the United States who is shot by the police while playing with a toy gun. The story unfolds partially after his death, and he's a ghost. He's watching his family and friends grieve, and it's also told partially while he is alive, and it shows the impact of poverty and racial inequality in his young life. Along the way, throughout the narrative, he meets other young Black men that have suffered a similar fate to him, including all the way back to Emmett Till in 1955, who was a young Black boy that was lynched in the United States. So hence the title Ghost Boys. This is a really, really good book for teachers or librarians who have young students that need help understanding the issues around police brutality, racism, and white supremacy. And of course, we have similar issues here in Australia. The context of this book is perfect to help explain the current situation in the US, but it is maybe something that could be used to reflect on similar inequalities in our own country. It's not a book that shies away from obviously very heavy issues. It's heart-wrenching, but it is age appropriate for 10 to 14-year-olds. And it's quite a short story with very sparse language that sort of it manages to be incredibly profound despite that there's not many words on the page, if that makes sense. It is quite sparse, but it expresses something deeply profound.
And if people are looking, we're going to talk in a moment about books that will deal a little more with the Australian context. And we've got some recommendations on that front because, of course, it's also National Reconciliation Week here. And part of National Reconciliation Week, I know you and I both believe, is reflecting on the way these issues of police brutality and racism play out in an Australian context. But if people are looking for some more US-specific suggestions, they might want to follow Project Lit on social media, which is a series of resources that deal, I guess, with and explore some of those books, particularly from an African-American perspective. And it's specifically aimed at young people. So you can check them out on Facebook and Twitter. Also, if you're looking for some more recommendations along the lines of what Karys has given us there.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Ernest. Brilliant recommendation. So the other one that actually explores very similar issues, but in an Australian context, is Catching Taylor Crow by Amberlynn Quay Molina and Aiskeel Quay Molina. which normally I would probably give to older readers, to be honest. But lately, a group of my year 7, specifically at Paran High School, have been all reading this and absolutely loving it. It's actually surprised me a little bit. When I read the book, I kind of thought it was one of those books that had so much literary merit and such high quality, but would maybe be enjoyed more by adults and older readers. So to have this group of year 7s reading it is really fantastic. And I'm going to run with it and keep giving it to young people. It does explore some really, really heavy themes, and I would recommend it to students cautiously. It is shocking and heartbreaking, and as the book progresses, it examines racism, violence, historic injustices, and corruption within the police force within an Australian context. So it does have complicated themes and a strong use of literary devices, including a mixture of prose and verse. But yeah, I would still recommend it for year 7s and 8s. It's a small town mystery, so I think that mystery element can help suck in young students into the narrative, and it intertwines themes of grief, colonial history, violence, and family. This would be a great set text as well, I believe, maybe at a year 8 or 9 level.
Absolutely. And I interviewed Quay Mulliner last year at the Melbourne Writers Festival on a panel with Claire G. Coleman, whose work is more adult fiction. But both authors talked about the way that speculative fiction and sort of more unusual, in a white literary context, unusual sort of literary structures actually can mirror Indigenous experience and Indigenous belief systems as well around issues like non-linear time, for example, which is something which is explored in that book. And yeah, it's a fantastic book that I think is incredibly layered, and I think young people can probably access it at a bunch of different entry points as well. So your more sort of sophisticated readers might be able to pick apart some of those really complex structures that are used, but for other readers, it's simply an engaging narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So the third book that I wanted to recommend for year 7s and 8s is something completely different. It's a book that I read this weekend and just absolutely could not put down. And I actually can't wait for my students to come back next week so I can thrust this into their hands very forcefully. So that book is The List of Things That Will Not Change. Have you read it?
I haven't, but I've seen it all over social media lately, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
It's, yeah, a beautiful, beautiful story. So it's just an all-round perfect book. The voice of the main character, who's 12-year-old Beatrice, it's so strong and compelling, and this book really sums up how hard change is for young people and what it looks like to go through really, I suppose seemingly small life changes for adults, but for young people, really big things. The other thing that I loved about it is the adults in it are really well written. Sometimes they're incompetent, they're flawed, they don't really understand what it's like to be a young person anymore, but they have good intentions, and the support that they offer the main character is really lovely. I highly recommend that book, probably to almost anyone in that age range.
Fantastic.
So moving on to year 9 and 10 recommendations. The first one that I wanted to recommend is Nona and Me by Claire Atkins. As you said earlier, it's National Reconciliation Week in Australia, and I think it's always important to make sure that First Nations voices are present in your library collections and on your set text lists. But this week is a really great week to raise awareness of these types of books with young people and with your students. So Nona and Me is actually from a couple of years ago now. I think it's 2016, but it's one of my favourite Australian books that explores issues of politics and racism within a very personal and accessible story of friendship. So it's about 2 girls who are in year 10, Rosie, who is white, and Nona, who's Aboriginal. And that difference has never been an issue in their friendship until there is a political announcement in their small mining town that starts to highlight the divisions within their communities. It's a really powerful coming of age story that celebrates friendship and loyalty, as well as family and community. And I actually just looked before this, and they have some incredible teaching notes on the Black Ink book website, as well as a number of YouTube videos with the author that explore some of or unpack some of the themes for young people.
Fantastic.
So the second book that I wanted to recommend is a book of poetry, which is Ellen Van Nieven's Comfort Food. Ellen just released a new book, I think last week. You recommended it.
I think so.
So I've not read I've not read their new book, Throat, yet. I feel like maybe might have some more mature sort of.
Yeah, I would quite uncomfortable necessarily handing it over to a young person, but no doubt some of them will find it anyway. It's a fantastic work.
Completely. But their book, Comfort Food, I would happily hand over to year 9s and 10s and 11s and 12s because I think it's a really incredible book of poetry that is very accessible and has some incredible language in it that I think young people could really enjoy. So it's Ellen's first book of poetry, and it explores identity and sovereignty and their restless quest for love. That's what it says on the back, which I really liked, through themes of place and food as well. It's a book, obviously it's called Comfort Food, and it's a book that kind of makes you feel a little bit hungry at times because of the rich descriptions of different food and meals. The language in it is really sensuous and really visceral with, as I keep saying, plenty to unpack. And it would make an incredible set text, I think, at an upper secondary level, or even to just pull out a couple of the really strong poems to look at in the classroom.
Certainly, and I know Heat and Light, their short fiction collection, has been used in a number of schools really successfully. Students really gravitate towards obviously they're a poet as well as a prose writer. So I think every time writers have that combination, it leads to really, really rich use of language. And I just posted, I think yesterday or the day before, on the VATE social media channels, a really great resource of Ellen talking about their work in conversation with Maxine Beneva-Clark for the Wheeler Centre. And one of the great sort of byproducts of the situation we find ourselves in is that many of these events like the Wheeler Centre conversation are actually available now online for free. If you wouldn't have been able to ever get there in the first place. So that's fantastic. And that conversation would be really great to use excerpts with young people in picking apart the use of language, because Ellen reflects really in a lot of depth about their work and the construction of the work and the kind of influences on their work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So the third book that I wanted to recommend for year 9 and 10 is one that I haven't read yet, but I feel confident recommending it because it's Patrick Ness, and that is his new book, Burn. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm so intrigued by the concept. And one of my librarian friends who I know has very similar taste to me and I trust completely, she has been raving about it. So I'll still recommend it without reading it, and I'm really excited to read it. Just arrived in the library this morning. You never know what you're going to get with Patrick Ness. That's, I think, his biggest skill. He always keeps you guessing. His work is highly unpredictable. But by the same measure, his books, they're not always the easiest to read, which I think makes them sometimes a little bit hard to sell to young people. But I think they're really perfect for readers that are up for a challenge and like to be pushed in their reading, which I think we all do know those readers, or we can identify them. So Patrick Ness is perfect for that. This book, as you can see from the cover, it's about dragons, or features dragons, but I'm told it's not a book about dragons. It's a book about love, revenge, prejudice, and faith. So
it's never just about the dragons, Karys.
It's never just about the dragons, but there are dragons in this book.
Well, and on the cover as well. So I feel like that's a fairly bold direction if you're not going to claim your book is about dragons. So
yeah. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading that. I'm going to add it to my my pile of to read. And the kids will all accuse me of being a book hog, but librarian.
I was literally just about to say, in case anyone was wondering if librarians order and read first before all others, here's your proof.
Yeah.
Couple of things I wanted to add to the picture as well. Are you done?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Fantastic. We had a little chat by email in preparing for this conversation, and I mentioned the Growing Up series of books published primarily by Black Ink as well. I've only got Growing Up African in Australia on hand. I wrote the teaching notes for this book, so I know they're done and they're available, and you can direct any complaints about them personally to my email address. Fantastic resource. The Growing Up books are fantastic.
You have to have them in your library. It's like an absolutely.
Yeah,
you have to have
and many teachers who've been around for a while will remember that Growing Up Asian was a really successful text on the BCE English text list for a really long time. So we've got obviously growing up African and growing up queer are the most recent iterations, and growing up disabled will be coming out. It was supposed to be this year, but it'll be next year now. But growing up Aboriginal in Australia, growing up African in Australia, there is a version of a growing up Muslim in Australia that doesn't quite fit. Growing up, there's a growing up Arab book, which was published by someone else as well. I can't remember who published that. But what's great about these books as well, obviously in and of themselves, they're really rich and fantastic texts to have in your library or in your school. But if you're a classroom teacher who wants to explore some of these issues around the legacy of colonisation in this land that gets called Australia, or you want to talk about modern day issues of race and racism in Australia, you can pick out age-appropriate stories. There's a really big range of stories in these books, and you can pick out ones that you think will be most appropriate for the age of students you're working with, and have a look at some of the cross-section of experiences, and also the evolution of, I mean, it's really a horrible thing to say, but sort of the evolution of racism in Australia and the way that it has a very painful legacy. And I think in keeping with what Karys said at the top of this conversation, I think what is happening in the US is rightfully triggering a very important conversation about the experience of people of colour in Australia, and particularly obviously in the light of National Reconciliation Week, the experience of Aboriginal people in Australia. So we'd really encourage you to have a look in your library. These are probably there, and pick them up and try and use excerpts in your class if possible. Should we talk about what we've been reading?
Yes, tell me what you've been reading.
You want me to go first? Okay. First up, I just finished midway through last week, You People by Nikita Lawani. Really amazing text. Have you started reading it yet, Karys?
No, I've not received it yet. I've ordered it, but it hasn't come.
So set in a restaurant, essentially, which sort of becomes a de facto haven for people who are, I guess, without easy options. So there may be people who are escaping issues of violence or family poverty, etc., and also predominantly people who are termed illegal immigrants. And the owner of the restaurant is quite mysterious, but looking for ways to help some of those people who he believes should have access to, I guess, legal recourse for the situation they find themselves in. So it's sort of told between two main characters who come from very different backgrounds. I won't reveal too much, but there is a lot of discussion of the Sri Lankan Civil War and the outcome of the Sri Lankan Civil War, which I think in an Australian context is really important for us to understand and engage with. The book is not Australian, set in the UK. But yeah, great read, really strongly recommend. Also, I really like the cover art, but don't judge a book by cover. My other recommendation, reading at the moment, have you heard about this, Karys?
No, I don't know anything about it.
So this is one of those books where occasionally you read something and you realise you are ageing. So The Butchers is set sort of between 2018 and 1996. And it's dealing with the BSE or mad cow crisis in the UK. So it's set in Ireland, but sort of the flow-on effects of what was happening in England and also Northern Ireland at the time. So I say that it reminds me how old I am, because it's not often that you read like a work of historical fiction that you can really, quite clearly remember. I was in grade 7 in 1996, so I can really clearly remember Mad Cow as a phenomenon, or that iteration of Mad Cow as a phenomenon. It deals a lot with the legacy of myth in Ireland. So the Butchers, the whole concept of the Butchers is linked to Irish folklore, essentially. I'm only a third of the way through, but yeah, strongly recommend. It's touted as one of the first works of fiction to deal with the BSE crisis. So
I was going to say, when you first started talking, I wondered if it was non-fiction, but that's really...
no, fiction. So looking at a family who, I mean, basically dealing with rural Irish life, so a lot of connection to cattle. What are you reading, Karys?
So I just got 2 books in the mail that I'm halfway through reading. One, which is Little Bandage Days by Kira Wilder, which is, I'm absolutely loving it, but it's sort of so visceral and intense. I'm having to read it in really small chunks. So it tells a story of a young family through the eyes of the mother. She has 2 young children and her husband gets a job in Switzerland, in Geneva. So they move over there. and his job is quite intense. He works all day and most of the night and is never home. So the whole story unfolds just her taking care of her 2 young children. It's sort of a bit of a descent into loneliness to the point of madness. And it's incredible. It's really, yeah, I highly recommend it. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really, I don't know if enjoying it is the word, but it's an incredible piece of literature. And yeah, a quiet story, but it is sort of getting a little bit more, getting more intense as it goes on. So I'm really interested to see how it ends. And then the other book that I've ordered, I'm a little bit nervous about because it's Rodham by Karys McEwen, and Karys McEwen is one of my all-time favorite authors, but this book has I think I have such high expectations of this book that I'm nervous to read it because I am worried it won't meet my expectations, which is such a weird, like, psychological thing when it comes to approaching.
Analyze that, Karys.
Like, these 2 books arrived and I've been so excited about the Karys McEwen book, but I didn't read that first. I wanted to put it off a little bit longer. I'm not sure why, but I am excited to read it, and hopefully it will meet my expectations. I've heard, I suppose, mixed reviews, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And that's a reimagining of Hillary Clinton's life if she hadn't met Bill Clinton. So I wonder how that works, writing a book like that. Like, did Hillary give her permission to write that book?
It's a very interesting question. I often think about that when people, for example, write Facebook into their fiction but don't mention Facebook. Is it about the legal ramifications, or is it about not wanting to? Yeah, it's a very interesting field. Question following up from that. When you were a kid, did you eat your favourite part of the dinner first or last?
I always ate it first, actually.
Oh, interesting.
I remember reading, I think, a line in like a Judy Blume novel or something that said you should always eat the best first in case the roof collapses and you've only eaten the bad stuff.
So why are you not reading the book? Okay, we'll leave the psychoanalysis there. Before we sign off for today, I just wanted to firstly thank Karys so much for this term. I know in this period of remote learning, it's been a real lifeline for VAPE members. It's been fantastic to hear your recommendations every fortnight. And in light of that, we're really happy to announce that you're going to be on board with us going forward. We're not going to ask so much of your time. We're going to move to 2 interviews a term. And we're going to make sure that they're really targeted so that we maximize your time. So I think we're looking at the first session next term will be around text selection for set texts looking to 2021. So stay tuned for that, VAPE members. Thank you so much, Karys, for all of your work for us this term. We've really appreciated it, and we'll see you next term.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.